It all began on a night when the rain wouldn't stop. The storm came down hard, drenching the lonely country road in sheets of water that blurred headlights and swallowed sound. For anyone driving, it was a night to regret leaving home. And for her, the CEO who had once believed she could control everything, it became the night her world was quietly, irrevocably shifted by someone she never saw coming. Because sometimes, the people who arrive in your life by chance, in the middle of a storm, are the very ones who remind you what it means to live again. The wipers fought against the downpour, barely clearing the windshield. Evelyn Marlowe, CEO of one of London's most powerful real estate firms, sat rigid behind the wheel of her stalled Bentley. The engine had coughed once, then died, leaving her stranded on a deserted country lane just outside Oxford. Her phone screen flickered uselessly, battery drained. She slammed it onto the passenger seat with a curse. The storm roared, thunder rattling her nerves, lightning carving the fields around her into terrifying flashes. For someone always in control of meetings, of boardrooms, of billion-pound projects, the helplessness clawed at her pride. She hated weakness. She hated fear. Yet sitting there, alone in a luxury cage of leather and steel, she felt both. Then, through the sheet of rain, she saw movement. A figure, blurred and fragile, trudged along the roadside. For a moment, she thought she imagined it. But no, it was a boy, maybe 16 or 17, his hair plastered to his head, clothes clinging to his thin frame. He walked without a hood, without a jacket, his steps steady despite the weather. She lowered her window slightly, rain immediately splattering her face. "Hey!" she called. The boy turned, startled, his eyes a clear blue even in the dim light. Something about his expression, open, unguarded, struck her. He approached the car cautiously. "My car won't start," Evelyn said, fighting to keep her tone sharp, businesslike. "Do you know anything about engines?" The boy gave a small, shy smile. "A little. I can try." And without hesitation, he stepped into the storm to help a stranger who looked nothing like him, a woman of wealth and power, while he seemed to have nothing at all. He popped the hood, rain drenching both of them. Evelyn sat frozen, torn between annoyance and disbelief. No tools, no cover, no expertise. What could he possibly do? Yet the boy's movements were sure, hands steady despite the water pouring down his arms. He adjusted a wire, tapped the battery casing, and asked her to try the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared back to life. Evelyn gasped. The boy stepped back quickly, almost embarrassed, brushing his wet hair from his eyes. He didn't look for thanks. He didn't look for money. He only nodded at her. "You're good now," he said simply. "Wait!" Evelyn called, but he was already walking away, swallowed by the curtain of rain. Something inside her twisted. She was used to deals, to transactions, to people who wanted something from her. But this boy, this poor drenched stranger, had given her help without asking for anything in return. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. For reasons she couldn't explain, her chest ached. She wanted to follow him, to ask who he was, why he was out there alone in the storm. But the thunder cracked again, and fear urged her to drive on. She did. But his face stayed with her long after the taillights faded into the night. The following morning, Evelyn sat in her office in London's glass skyline, the storm behind her but not forgotten. She tried to focus on the day's agenda. A merger deal worth millions, a press conference, meetings lined up like dominoes. Yet her mind drifted back to the boy. His clothes clung to him in the rain, yet his kindness had been steady, unshaken. Her assistant entered, reminding her of deadlines, but Evelyn barely heard. She wondered where he had gone after leaving her car. Did he have a home nearby? Was he safe? Why had he been walking alone in such weather? For the first time in years, business didn't feel urgent. The boy's act of kindness had pierced through her carefully constructed armor. Evelyn, the woman known for ruthlessness in the boardroom, found herself restless, distracted, and oddly human. That night, she drove the same road again, scanning the fields and pathways. She told herself it was ridiculous, but she couldn't shake the pull. She wanted to see him again, to ask his name, but the road was empty, the storm replaced by silence. Only the memory remained. Days turned into a week. Evelyn attended board dinners, charity galas, and strategy meetings, but she carried the storm with her. Every time she looked at her reflection, she saw not the powerful CEO, but the woman in the car, scared and helpless, saved by a boy who asked for nothing. One Saturday morning, she found herself in a small village outside Oxford, drawn there by impulse. She parked near the market square, wandering aimlessly among stalls of bread and flowers, hoping, though she wouldn't admit it, to see him. And then she did. He was across the square, carrying crates for a grocer, sleeves rolled up, hair falling into his eyes. He looked older than she remembered, though still young, still with that quiet steadiness. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered in his, followed by a polite nod, as if she were any other stranger. Evelyn's heart kicked in her chest. She had found him. But what would she say? A thank you wasn't enough. And why did she feel as if this meeting meant something more than gratitude? Evelyn crossed the square, her heels clicking against the cobblestones. For once, she felt out of place, not because of her wealth, but because of her vulnerability. The boy straightened up from the crates, brushing his hands against his jeans. "You," she said softly, realizing she didn't even know his name. He looked at her steadily, neither surprised nor intimidated. "Car trouble again?" he asked lightly, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "No," Evelyn replied, her throat tightening. "I wanted to thank you properly. That night, you didn't have to stop." "It was nothing," he said simply. But Evelyn felt the weight behind his words, the kind of humility born from someone who had learned to give without expecting return. They sat on a low stone wall near the market, rain clouds drifting lazily above. Evelyn tried to ask about him, but he answered sparingly. His name was Noah, 17. He worked odd jobs around the village to help his grandmother, who had raised him since his parents died in an accident years ago. Evelyn listened, the pieces falling into place. No wonder his eyes carried an old soul's steadiness. He had already weathered storms larger than the one she'd met him in. She wanted to offer help immediately, money, opportunities, but she stopped herself. He would refuse. She could sense it. His pride wasn't arrogance. It was dignity, and something about that humbled her more than any billionaire deal ever had. When she left, Noah gave her a small nod. "Drive safe," he said. She carried those 2 words with her all the way back to London. The weeks ahead pulled Evelyn back into her corporate whirlwind, but Noah remained a steady whisper in her thoughts. She started visiting the village on weekends, always telling herself it was for the peaceful atmosphere. But she knew the truth. Each time she came, she found Noah working, fixing fences, carrying groceries, repairing bicycles. There was nothing he wouldn't try, no task too small. And always, he gave more of himself than was asked. Evelyn watched quietly, almost ashamed. For years, her life had been measured in profit margins and growth charts. Watching Noah, she began to remember the value of simple kindness, the kind that couldn't be bought. And slowly, she began to realize she wasn't just grateful. She was being changed. One Saturday, she surprised herself by offering to help at the grocer's stand where Noah worked. The owner laughed at her polished nails and expensive shoes, but Evelyn persisted. She packed bread, carried boxes, and by the end of the day, her muscles ached in ways boardrooms never caused. Noah noticed her struggle but didn't mock her. Instead, he gave her that small, steady smile again. "Not bad," he said, which felt like the highest praise she had received in years. That evening, they walked along the riverbank. The air was cool, the sunset bleeding into gold. Evelyn asked Noah about his dreams. He shrugged, saying he wanted to finish school, maybe study engineering. But university costs money we don't have. Evelyn's chest tightened. She had enough money to send him anywhere in the world, but she stayed quiet, afraid that if she offered too much too soon, she would break the fragile trust forming between them. Back in London, Evelyn's board grew restless. They noticed her distraction, her sudden absence on weekends, her softer tone in meetings. A fellow executive, Marcus, pressed her one evening. "You're changing, Evelyn. Where's the edge that made you feared?" She almost laughed. Feared. That was what she had been? A woman who commanded respect but inspired little warmth? Noah's face flickered in her mind, reminding her of something gentler, more human. For the first time, Evelyn questioned whether the edge Marcus admired had been worth the loneliness it carried. Perhaps it was time to redefine what strength meant. And for reasons she didn't yet dare to say aloud, she knew Noah was part of that answer. Her visits to the village grew longer. She met Noah's grandmother, Margaret, a frail but spirited woman who welcomed Evelyn into her modest home with tea and biscuits. The house was small, its furniture worn, but the warmth inside eclipsed any luxury Evelyn had ever known. Margaret thanked Evelyn for giving Noah company. "He works too hard for someone so young," she sighed, "but he has a good heart, always has." Evelyn watched Noah from across the room, speaking gently to his grandmother, and she realized Margaret was right. Noah's goodness wasn't an accident. It was the core of who he was. And sitting there, Evelyn felt something stir she hadn't let herself feel in years. Belonging. The more time Evelyn spent with Noah, the more their differences became clear. She lived in penthouses. He lived in a tiny village home. She commanded boardrooms. He fixed fences with his bare hands. Yet beneath the surface, they shared something neither could ignore: loneliness. One evening, walking home from the market, Evelyn admitted softly, "For all I've built, my life feels empty." The words surprised even her. Noah didn't rush to fill the silence. He simply said, "Maybe you've been building the wrong things." It was a simple statement, but for Evelyn, it landed like truth she had been avoiding for years. By autumn, rumors spread in London's corporate circles. The once untouchable Evelyn Marlowe was missing dinners with investors, skipping weekend retreats. Marcus grew bolder, challenging her authority. But Evelyn didn't care. The deals felt hollow compared to afternoons in the village, laughter with Margaret, quiet talks with Noah. She found herself smiling more, and her assistant whispered once, "You seem lighter." Evelyn didn't admit it aloud, but it was true. And the storm, the night she thought she was helpless, was the reason. One evening, Noah asked her why she kept coming back. Evelyn hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because you remind me what matters." Noah frowned slightly. "I'm just a village boy. You're you." Evelyn shook her head. "You're not just anything. You gave me something I'd forgotten. A reason to begin again." Noah looked at her quietly, the weight of her words sinking in. That night, something shifted between them, a bond unspoken but undeniable. But life doesn't change without resistance. Marcus, suspicious of Evelyn's absences, began digging. He followed her one weekend, shocked to see the CEO of a billion-pound company laughing in a village market with a poor boy. He returned to London with ammunition. At the next board meeting, he mocked her. "While the company waits for leadership, Evelyn is off playing village games." Laughter rippled around the table. Evelyn's cheeks burned, but she didn't back down. Later that night, she wondered if her growing connection with Noah would cost her everything she had built. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she cared. The storm returned weeks later. Another downpour that echoed the night she first met Noah. But this time she wasn't stranded. She was sitting at Margaret's table, sipping tea as rain battered the windows. The three of them shared stories, laughter, warmth that drowned out the thunder. Evelyn realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The storm no longer symbolized helplessness. It had become the backdrop of something new, connection. Looking at Noah, she silently thanked fate for breaking down her car that night. But Margaret's health began to fail. One afternoon, Noah rushed into the house pale and shaken. "She collapsed," he whispered. Evelyn's heart lurched. They spent nights in the hospital, Noah refusing to leave his grandmother's side. Evelyn stayed too, holding coffee, offering silent comfort. In those sterile halls, she saw Noah's strength and his vulnerability. He was still a boy shouldering burdens far too heavy. Margaret squeezed Evelyn's hand once, whispering, "Thank you for being here for him." Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. She had never been thanked for something so deeply human. When Margaret passed weeks later, Noah broke. Evelyn held him as he wept, the strong, steady boy unraveling in her arms. She whispered that he wasn't alone, though she knew the words could never erase the loss. In that moment, Evelyn understood her place in his life wasn't about wealth or power. It was about being the anchor he needed, just as he had unknowingly been hers. The storm had brought them together, but grief was binding them in ways even deeper. Noah's grief turned into resolve. "She wanted me to finish school," he said one night, his voice raw. "I'm going to make her proud." Evelyn offered quietly, "I can help. With tuition. With anything." For the first time, Noah didn't refuse. He simply nodded, eyes shining with determination. It wasn't charity anymore, it was partnership. Evelyn felt a surge of pride she hadn't felt even in her corporate triumphs. Together, they began planning his future. In London, the boardroom wars grew sharper. Marcus pushed for her removal, citing neglect of duty. Evelyn stood firm, her voice calm. "Duty isn't just to profits, it's to people." The room fell silent. For the first time, Evelyn realized she wasn't afraid of losing her position. She had already gained something far more valuable. The woman who once measured her worth by deals had discovered a new currency: kindness, connection, and purpose. Months passed. Noah enrolled in engineering courses with Evelyn's support, excelling quickly. She visited often, proud of the man he was becoming. Their bond deepened, not romantic, not maternal, but something rare and transformative. One evening, Noah said softly, "That night, I thought I was just fixing a car. I didn't know I was fixing a person, too." Evelyn's throat tightened. He had given her more than he could ever realize. Years later, Evelyn stood at a university graduation ceremony, clapping as Noah crossed the stage. He was taller now, confident, his eyes still carrying that same steady light. When he found her afterward, he wrapped her in a hug. "We made it," he whispered. Evelyn smiled, tears spilling freely. "You made it. I just believed in you." But deep down, she knew the truth. They had both saved each other. The storm had been years ago, yet it still lived inside her, not as fear, but as memory. Sometimes, when rain fell against her penthouse windows, Evelyn would close her eyes and remember the boy walking alone through the night, offering nothing but kindness. It had changed everything. And now, as she watched Noah step into his future, she realized storms weren't always meant to break us. Sometimes they were meant to bring us the people who would help us begin again. The storm that once left her stranded had, in truth, led her home,